Hello there, listeners. It's Susie New from the Australian Society of Anaesthetists, and happy 2026. Welcome to our first episode for the year. Hopefully you're a subscriber to the podcast. A huge thank you to you, and are receiving this podcast not long after it's been published. If you are not a subscriber, then I encourage you to press that follow or subscribe button so that you get our latest episodes and are not receiving this Happy New Year message at some time in the year that seems weird. As you've probably experienced, operating theatres in Australia often go down to low activity over Christmas and New Year. So I wanted to ease back into 2026 by sharing this conversation I had with Dr Andrea Binks, who is based in Wollongong, which is just south of Sydney. She is an anaesthetist and an accomplished yoga facilitator. Before I introduce the conversation further, I want to share some thoughts on the new year. I want to ask specifically whether you have made any New Year's resolutions. This year, I've really embraced the slowdown and used it as a time to reflect, review, and renew. There was a stage in my career when I felt I could say yes to almost any new offer that was being made to me. You know that saying of, if you want something done, just ask a busy person? Well, I like to think that that applied to me. I just felt like I had the capacity to absorb more work. Definitely being single or not having children probably was a big part of that. A few years ago, it was actually through a coaching conversation, I realised that this was not sustainable and it just didn't align with who I was anymore. So I eventually sat down and counted that I was on 17 different committees. And there were some there that I didn't feel like I was contributing to a standard that I expected of myself. So I began the process of looking at what my priorities were and stepping down from roles, or even better, nominating some wonderful people to replace me. Thank you to people I have tapped on the shoulder and who've said yes. So as we start a new year, I've done the same. I've considered what worked last year, what didn't. Was I holding a position that someone else, someone more appropriate could fill? And so far, yes, there have been some changes. And I'm thinking I'm not the only one, because I've had a few people reach out to me at different stages in their careers. By that, I mean trainees, mid-career, end of career, wondering if there is some way that they can get involved with the ASA. And this really is music to my ears. The ASA works hard to be your organisation, made up of your voices and representing you. We can't do what we do without all the hard work from our members who volunteer so much of their time. This podcast is one such example. I also love hearing that people want to give back to the profession and that they're considering that the ASA might be one way, one mechanism by which you can do this. So if that thought has crossed your mind, feel free to reach out to me or your local ASA committee member. If you're already giving back to the profession in other ways, then I thank you. Thank you for your efforts. Now, moving on to yoga. Many people make New Year's resolutions that are health-based, lose weight, eat more healthily, get more sleep, go to the gym. I think I've cycled through all of those over the years. How about you? Did you make any health-based New Year's resolutions? And now that we're about a month into the new year, are you still doing what you set out to do? If not, you're not alone. Did you know that there's something called Quitter's Day? It's usually the middle Friday in January. It's the day when motivation drops off, along with gym memberships and fitness app subscriptions. If you don't believe me, look it up. So if you can relate to this, if this is you, I'm hoping this conversation might help inspire you to look at your goals and how you're going about achieving them. Maybe you're hitting your goals, and maybe this conversation will inspire you to look at yoga or meditation or other things that are good for you mentally as well as physically. What I really appreciated is Dr. Binks applying the same diligence, attention that make her an expert anaesthetist to the field of yoga. To put that statement in a bit more context, I listened recently to a conversation with Professor Roger Kneebone, who is a former trauma surgeon who became a GP and who researches the nature of being an expert or expertise. I recall some of the key points of that conversation, and one is that defining an expert can be really hard. Most experts don't call themselves experts. You'll often know you're an expert because you have the thought, you just do it. Think about how you successfully insert cannulas day after day. You just do them and it looks effortless. He also makes a distinction about teaching, or what he calls reaching mastery. One of the keys here is noticing gaps in the learner that often the learner may not see in themselves, and then delivering instructions to them so as not to overload them. So I really appreciated Dr. Binks' insights into yoga and the expertise and mastery that she clearly has in this field. I hope you'll appreciate it too. Thank you so much for giving up some time this morning. I'm so glad we have rescheduled this podcast so many times. I think there was your family, my family, but now our families are...
Families are okay.
But anyway, today we are talking about yoga and anaesthesia. And I know people might be wondering what the connection is, but that's because you're an anaesthetist and a yoga instructor. So I couldn't think of a better way to connect the two. First of all, let's go back to anaesthesia. You're an anaesthetist in New South Wales?
In Wollongong, New South Wales. I trained in the UK though, so my arrival in anaesthesia was a little bit of a convoluted route, as I guess my arrival in yoga was. I've been in Wollongong since 2012.
Okay, and when you say your path into anaesthesia was a convoluted route, what happened there?
When I first started out in medicine, I was really interested in being a physician. So I did physician training and was doing a cardiology subspecialty rotation. Really loved cardiology, thought that was going to be my path. But my husband and I had decided that we wanted to take some time out. So we were working the NHS. We took a year, we went traveling, we traveled around the world. We had an amazing time and we ended up in Sydney. So he was doing the nets retrieval job, loving it. And I was kind of tagging along and said, oh, I'll find a job in something. Ended up doing an intensive care job and working as an intensive care registrar at North Shore. And I thought, actually, I really like this. This is much better than the physician training. I get to do all the cool interventional stuff all the time. And I liked the diagnostic challenge of ICU. It's kind of gave my physician head something to do, along with being practical. And because we'd just been traveling, I wanted a way to do something that could facilitate more travel. And the idea of having patients that I followed up every 3 months or 6 months for the rest of my life didn't particularly appeal for that stage. Ended up thinking the way into intensive care training was probably through anaesthesia, because we were from the UK and this was the year 2001 and getting permanent residency was more difficult than winning the lotto. The suggestion was, well, go back to the UK, get trained and come back as a consultant. So I did.
Oh, right.
I went back to the UK, started anaesthesia training, did dual training anaesthesia and intensive care. The training program in the UK for dual training is 7 years. So kind of went right back to the beginning, started as a first year anaesthetic trainee, had a couple of kids along the way, had some maternity leave. And 10 years later, we came back to Sydney as consultants.
There's something there about setting a goal and just chipping away at it, isn't
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. The goal's still there. And here we are. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I think that transition of going back to the start, that mental transition, because you've already gone through different phases in your career in terms of acquiring skills and knowledge, but also responsibility and accountability. And then going back to the start of another training program and being told how to tape in your IVs is, I think, a big challenge for a lot of people having to either requalify in another country or start another training program.
And it's a huge challenge. And it was important enough to me that I thought, this is going to make me a better doctor at the end of the day. I had done all my physician exams. I'd done my MRCP exams and I was working as a cardiology registrar. So I had gone reasonably far down that path. And then to say, okay, I'm going to have to sit all the anaesthetic exams, but putting myself back in that beginner mindset. And
yes,
it was a conscious choice, which I decided not to think was going to be hard, but was going to be good for me.
I get a sense of, they call it getting on the balcony. You're looking at this with the bigger picture in mind. Yes, you were very senior in your cardiology career. Going back to the beginning is a challenge, but there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger goal out there. Particularly, I can imagine during those more humbling moments when you're being treated like an absolute beginner.
But actually, I think anaesthesia is so different from any other specialty in the hospital that when you walk into theatre and you get shown that anaesthetic machine for the first time, it's like, oh, okay, I'm totally out of my league here. I have no idea.
I think a little bit of humility goes a long way. I've been asking different specialists this, but how long, if we counted up all the years from high school, how long was it before you became a specialist?
I graduated high school in 1996. And I qualified as an anaesthetic consultant in 2011.
Okay.
So that's 11 plus 4, 15 years.
That's not too bad, actually, in the scheme of things.
Yes.
I know people who've taken maybe 17, 20 years. So
yeah.
It's actually not too bad. So you came out of the UK dual specialised in anaesthesia and ICU.
Yes.
And when you came to Australia, did you keep up those two specialties, and are you still working in ICU as well now?
So no, I'm not. When I started investigating what my options were, it became clear quite early on that the IMG pathway for anaesthesia was reasonably well trodden and quite well defined. And I could start in a hospital where I was working with supervision, so as a provisional fellow, and go through the IMG process reasonably quickly. So it was a year of supervised practice, full-time equivalent, and a workplace-based assessment, and a number of other kind of more paperwork type-based exercises. And I really wanted to do intensive care. And so I had started down the pathway before we left Sydney. So I had got a year of my ICU reg work accredited for the College of Intensive Care Medicine. And I had got all my recognition of prior learning from my medicine accredited. So I had the ICU logbook going, and I was accrediting my training time in the UK for KICM training. And then whilst I was in the UK, I had 2 kids. When we were moving over here, they were 1 and 3 years old. So still babies. And looking at intensive care training, even with all the accreditation I had so far, I still needed to do another year as a registrar and then sit the KICM exam, and then potentially some fellow time. And then the intensive care landscape at the time, and I'm not really sure because I haven't followed it up, was a little bit more tricky in terms of getting work. So a job at the end of the day wasn't particularly guaranteed. Whereas in anaesthesia, particularly in Wollongong, I managed to get into Wollongong just before a big expansion happened. So just before we expanded our theatres from 8 to 15. So they were needing specialists. They were happy to sponsor me as an IMG. And it seemed to be the easiest way. And I thought, well, I'll do this now and then I'll look at the ICU later. But the further away I got from having done the UK Diploma of Intensive Care, European Diploma of Intensive Care, the further away I got from that, the less attainable it seemed to go back. So I have left it. It was interesting, actually. During COVID, I was approached by a few ICU specialists going, oh, did you ever complete that? Because we could use you.
Were you tempted?
I was reasonably tempted, but I thought, no, I probably wouldn't be doing either myself or anyone else a favour, because by that stage, I was probably 10 years post ICU experience. So I thought my ego says I would be fine, but realistically, I don't think my skill set's quite there anymore.
Was there a moment that you thought, okay, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to all that hard work and just not pursue it? Do you recall that moment?
I remember struggling with it in the first couple of years. I don't think there was ever a single moment of clarity that this is it, I am now walking away. I think it was a gradual fading of that ambition and it being replaced with more ambitions aligned with where I was going with anaesthesia. So I became a supervisor of training and I was involved with a little bit with the university with medical school teaching. So teaching and welfare and trainee issues became a little bit more all-encompassing and I was able to focus my attention there. And that allowed me to let go of that ICU research, writing papers, presenting at conferences, ambition that I had been working with.
Yeah, but that's not too uncommon, isn't it? I think people will start out with a certain idea for their career and some float and some don't, and other opportunities always seem to come along.
Oh, definitely. And I think where I am now is a very good fit for me. Not saying that intensive care wouldn't have been, but I am very happy with the way my career path is panning out.
When did yoga start featuring in your life?
In my life, it's always been there. The interesting life journeys, my family has always moved around a lot. And I went to an international school in Belgium, and one of the teachers at the international school used to teach yoga. So my mum has school reports of me aged 5, 6, 7 about my yoga skills and about how that was the thing I really loved about school. I guess I started when I was a PGY 2 or 3. I was looking for something. I needed some sort of outlet, sort of physical outlet from work. And I remember my mum saying to me, "Oh, you used to love yoga when you were a kid. Maybe you should look at yoga." And I sat with it for a little bit and I got one of these videos. I was like, "Oh, it's better, but it's not quite it." And then after we had been traveling and we landed in Sydney, there was a yoga studio at the end of my street. And it was an Ashtanga yoga studio. And I went in and I did my first couple of classes there and I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
Was that the first time you tried Ashtanga yoga?
Yes, it was. I didn't know anything about Ashtanga yoga. I saw yoga and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And then I was doing it once or twice a week. And then they had some guest teachers and I did a couple of workshops and I was like, oh, wow, this is really good. And I met a woman who's a really good friend of mine now who lived down the street. We started talking about all things yoga and she was telling me a little bit about philosophical aspects of yoga and it just completely blew my mind. And then I just kind of found just that yearning, like I just want more. 1 or 2 classes a week isn't enough. I need to do more. And Ashtanga fits very nicely to, I think, type A type personalities. It's very energetic. It's very much you turn up, you do 6 days a week, no matter what. You work at your own speed. It was a Mysore style class, which is basically you have a sequence and you just work your way through the sequence to wherever you are. And you just do that every day.
And for those people who aren't so familiar with yoga, how does Ashtanga differ from other styles or what makes it unique?
So Ashtanga yoga is a way of practicing yoga, which is connecting movements in a certain sequence. You always do the same sequence of movements and it starts off with sun salutations. And then in between each pose, each body shape, there's like a little connecting sequence to take you to the next body shape. And with Ashtanga, it's always the same. The way it's designed is very clever because you start out with a sun salutation that kind of hits the whole body. And then you do some standing poses, which build strength. And then you do some seated poses, which build flexibility. And then you do some upside down poses. And then you end with a seated meditation. So the whole purpose of yoga is essentially to get your body in a state where you can sit still and meditate or contemplate or whatever you want to call it. But the thing about Ashtanga that's different is the fact that it's constantly moving, it's more energetic, and it's the same every time.
Do you have to do the whole sequence? Like if you're time poor, would you try and race through it or would you just try and say, okay, I'm just going to do the first part of it today?
So as an Ashtangi, you would start at the beginning and you would stop when you ran out of time. David Swenson, I think he was an Ashtanga yoga teacher. He came up with some short forms, which was practice for when you didn't have a lot of time. So the typical Ashtanga sequence is 5 sets of sun salutation A, 5 sets of sun salutation B, and everything's in 5. So 5 breaths in this pose. So his short forms were 3 sets of sun salutation A, 2 sets of sun salutation B, do these 3 standing poses, these 4 seated poses, and then finish with upside down pose. So it was truncating it, but that was mind-blowing for people who did Ashtanga because you don't do that. You just start at the beginning and you stop when you stop.
It's like anything, isn't it? There's the traditionalists and all the people who take it forward.
Yes, that's right.
It's interesting you mentioned a man's name. I've dabbled in yoga over the years, I suppose, like many people, and I did dabble in Ashtanga at one point. And I remember when I first went, I was really struck how many more men there were in the class compared to other forms of yoga that I'd been to. Have you noticed that? Gender difference between the different forms of yoga?
Yeah, so the classes where there've been more men have been Ashtanga. So of the types of yoga where I've had male teachers, Ashtanga has been the main one. And then there was a couple of really lovely male teachers in Wollongong actually who teach Vinyasa Flow. So Vinyasa Flow is a similar sort of yoga in that every pose is joined to another one with a joining sequence. But with Vinyasa Flow, there's a lot more interpretation. So it's a lot more open to variation by the teacher. You can vary how the class is put together based on what you want your theme of your class to be, what the level of your students are, how you're feeling on the day. You can play with it a lot more.
I think I've been to Vinyasa and the variation was to do with the cycles of the moon.
Yes. Cycles of the moon is quite a good way of thinking about how to put together a class.
Okay. And so you were PGY2, you found this lovely yoga studio at the end of your street. And it sounds like from then that's when you started regular practice.
It sort of evolved. It wasn't immediate. It started out as the 1 or 2 classes a week, and then eventually the 5, 6 days a week. And then it sort of informed choices in the rest of my life. So this is when I was in Sydney. So I was doing ICU reg year. So it was the 7 days on, 7 days off. So I would go to the 5:15 or 5:45 a.m. class and then go straight to work.
Wow. I was going to ask you how, because a lot of people who do medicine or end up working in medicine realize at some point that they've had to give up so many hobbies, so many sports. Starting a medical career, having a very intense job like ICU regging or just any type of regging, maintaining your sports, your interests, having children is the other big challenge.
Yes.
And I know from when I did yoga, I got the sense that from the very hardcore yogis that there was coming to class, but they were almost always practicing at home every day. So what was your mix like from going to class, practicing at home, juggling it with intense career, having family?
Yeah, so it's varied over time. When the yoga studio was at the end of the street, I just used to go there. It sort of gave me permission to be able to practice at home because of the way the practice was set out. By the time I'd been going to that studio for nearly 2 years, I knew the sequence. I knew enough to be able to do it by myself. So we moved back to the UK at that stage and I started my anaesthetic training. And I found a local teacher. He would run classes 2 or 3 times a week. At that stage, I was beginning anaesthetic training, starting to think about studying. So I couldn't go to the studio every day. I was having to practice by myself. So I'd practice every morning, not very long. I would do probably 15, 20 minutes and that was it. And then I would do 2 or 3 classes a week, which would be a couple of hours.
Wow. That's amazing to fit that into your schedule. That's dedication.
I mean, this was pre-kids, but we did have
exams.
Exam, yeah. And then when I came to do my final exam, the teacher who I was still with said, I'm running a yoga teacher training, you should join. And I said, oh, I don't want to teach yoga. I have no interest in that whatsoever. Besides, I'm studying for these anaesthetic exams. They're kind of a big deal and they're taking up pretty much all my spare time.
I think just the fact that you're making it to a couple of classes a week, that's incredible when you're studying and working.
Well, I had found when I was studying for my primary, a lot of my going to classes dropped away and I was just practicing by myself. And I wasn't in a great place mentally, having given away all the exercise. I think I dedicated everything to study. And I realized at the end of the process that I made it through the exams, but kind of by the skin of my teeth. As a person, I was only just holding it together. Academically, I was okay, but the rest of me was not.
I think everyone emerges out the other side of exams feeling that. They just think, what have I become in that last year?
Yeah. So when I came to do my final, I thought I'm going to have to do things differently. And actually, if I committed to doing the yoga teacher training, I would have to keep my yoga. I said, look, my focus has got to be my anaesthetic exams. I'm curious to go deeper into yoga and the philosophy behind it, the thinking behind it, why teaching happens the way it does, look at things with a group of like-minded people. And he said, well, you'd probably be fine. The first 2 modules are anatomy and physiology. You probably can just turn up and don't have to do any external reading.
You probably got that.
Maybe it's doable. And so the teacher training committed me. So I had to commit to a daily practice, but he didn't put a time limit on the daily practice. And I thought, well, that's probably good. Yeah. I can commit to 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. That's doable at home.
Yeah.
And I would make it so that when I got out of bed in the morning, I would fall over my yoga mat. In the UK, in the middle of winter, it's never easy to practice. So I just gave myself permission to do things like practice in my pajamas. Stupid stuff like that. Removing as many barriers as possible.
There's so many people who've talked about that concept. I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits or Momentum, but they talk about if you want to change a habit, to look at the triggers just around it. So in this case, I want to get up and exercise, or I want to get up and do yoga, and then set it up the night before while you're thinking about it. So the trigger is just there. You don't even have to think about it.
Absolutely. We would meet up once a month on a weekend day and do a big group practice and then talk through whatever module we were doing. The yoga teacher training was 2 years of intense, once a month, all weekend meeting.
Wow. And this is 2 years of teacher training.
Yeah.
And you started it before you sat your exams?
Sat my exams and then kept going with the teacher training.
I can see your hesitation because everyone's usually so focused on exams that they don't want to be starting any new project, especially one that's a 2-year project. So I'm just blown away by your headspace at that time and your dedication, really. That's so impressive.
I was just thinking this would be a really good way of keeping some balance and keeping something that's important to me. And I had no intention of teaching. It was, I'm doing this for me, and this is for my interest so that I can learn more about this stuff that I'm really enjoying and I just seem to want to do more of, and I don't quite understand why that is.
When I talk to trainees about managing that exam process, that study process, particularly people who haven't made it through the first time, and learning mindfulness, doing, as you said before, doing something like yoga as that pathway, and you use your body to then get to a state where your mind can rest or be mindful, and then how mindfulness can help improve concentration. Did you find some of those mental benefits whilst you're practicing so much yoga and then diving into the teacher training? Did you find them helpful in terms of preparing for your exam?
Oh, hugely. I just think I found it hugely helpful just for life in general and just showing up as a human being and connecting with other people. But yes, it had been commented on reasonably early in my anaesthesia training when yoga had been a big thing for me, even before exams and even before diving deeper. You find yourself in crisis situations from time to time, and consultants would comment on how I managed to stay in the moment and stay focused. They'd be like, how can you do that? Like, as a second year trainee, you've just had this really awful crisis. Why are you not falling apart in a corner? Is it just that you put on a really good front? Are you pedaling wildly underneath and you've just got this really serene front? I was like, no, I feel like I was thinking real time through the whole thing. I didn't realize that was unusual. That idea of being in that flow state and being able to just let everything fall away and being completely focused on what's happening in front of you at the time. I remember talking to a couple of the consultants at the time and going, well, I practice a lot of yoga and that's kind of how I feel when I'm practicing. And so I think I had already worked out that it was doing something good that most people didn't have access to.
So it's good for you in a crisis at work, but it's also good in terms of helping you focus and get through your exam preparation.
Yes, exactly. It's a lot of it about just being in the moment and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, how to breathe when you're in a tight spot, whether that's a tricky yoga pose where you're twisted round and you're facing the wrong way and your lungs are all squished, or whether it's a tricky spot because you're feeling quite anxious and your breath's up here and you can't quite take a deep breath. It all ends up feeling the same.
So you did your teacher training in the UK?
Yeah.
And then you passed your final exams over there and then you came out to Australia not long after. When you came to Australia, what was your mindset then in terms of yoga? Were you still at that stage of, I don't want to teach, I've just got this greater awareness of yoga now?
So yeah, as part of the teacher training, I had to be assessed on my teaching. So I was totally tricked by the facilitator because I ended up teaching for a couple of years over in the UK. So he'd get external assessors to come along and assess my teaching. It was all aspects of teaching, not just how I put a class together, but my business strategy, my advertising.
That's better than what you learn at medical school. Everyone just expects you to go out and become a specialist, and no one tells you how to run a private practice and set up a business.
So yes, that was all part of the course. So I had been teaching for a little while, and then when I landed in the new country, new town, I was like, where's my yoga? So found a local yoga studio, started going to some classes. It was a vinyasa studio run by a really lovely couple. And the woman was pregnant and wanted some maternity cover for her classes and said, would you teach some yoga for me?
In terms of coming from overseas as an anaesthetist, this AMC, is there a similar process for yoga instructors?
Really no. Yoga teaching is not very well regulated. I studied in the UK with the British Wheel of Yoga, which is like an overarching organisation. And to remain a member of the British Wheel of Yoga and registered as a teacher, I had to do CPD type activities. So I had a lot of evidence as to my qualifications, my ongoing teaching, and my professional development as a yoga teacher. And I think within Australia, there certainly doesn't seem to be as much regulation in terms of who can set themselves up as a yoga teacher. The studio asked me about my experience and was interested in what I had done for my professional development. And then my professional development since then through yoga has been really based on my interests and based on my life stage as well. So I did some pregnancy yoga teacher training. So I'm qualified to teach pregnancy yoga. 1 and 3-year-old are now 17 and 14. So I did a teen yoga teacher training. So I teach teenagers. And then I came across an amazing woman, very local to me in Wollongong, who teaches yoga for trauma, body image, self-harm. And so very much trauma-informed yoga. Not only the way I teach, but the way probably I approach a lot of life.
That's really interesting, because for a while I've been wanting to find someone to do a podcast with, or just dive a bit further into what is trauma-informed care, because I think as anaesthetists, we're meeting people at a vulnerable time in their lives. It's stressful coming for surgery, almost always. And then there's going to be people in there who will have had trauma, almost certainly. And are we doing anything to make that better or worse? And can we do anything to make that better or worse? So I'm interested in how trauma-informed yoga might differ from regular yoga or non-trauma-informed yoga.
Yes, quite a lot, actually. I mean, I guess it depends on what you see yoga as. If you see yoga as just turning up and putting your body in various different shapes for an hour and then going home, then it's pretty much the same. But it's all about approach and languaging and awareness for you as the facilitator dealing with people who are coming into your room. So I don't do yoga for trauma. I don't advertise my yoga classes as a place where people who self-identify as having trauma should come. However, I don't know who's walking into my room.
So a bit like anaesthesia, right? We don't know.
Exactly. One of the big things about having experienced trauma is that you don't feel safe, either in the space or even in your own body. Quite often that results in something like dissociation. So your body is not a safe place to be. So some cues within yoga that would be very different in a trauma-informed approach. For example, something as simple as, let's sit and breathe, everybody close your eyes, is a very simple cue, but that's not safe for somebody who doesn't feel safe in their body with their eyes closed.
Yeah, they might think that closing their eyes in a room full of strangers makes them really vulnerable.
Exactly. If I set the room up so I am between the yoga practitioners and the door, there's no exit. So that would feel really unsafe. The studio I use happens to be a dance studio and it has mirrors. And I have had to be really mindful about where I position myself and where I position the students so that they don't, the whole body image thing as well. There's not trauma per se, but so you're not practicing looking at yourself in the mirror because that does not feel safe. And a lot of response to trauma has been when you don't have a choice or your ability to cope has been overwhelmed and you end up feeling like you have had no choice. So when I teach a class in a trauma-informed way, my language is invitational. So I would say, if it feels comfortable in your body, we're going to move now into downward facing dog. So you can press into your hands. If it feels comfortable, you can stretch your hips back, maybe feel into the back of your legs. If downward dog doesn't feel like a place that you need to be at the moment, then maybe you might like to try some more cat-cow or any other option that feels right for you in this moment. And not calling attention to people who are choosing something different, because often if they are not able to do what you're suggesting, they feel shame.
Yes. And there are some yoga classes I've been to that feel a bit more competitive, even though they say it's not a competition.
Exactly. The competitive aspect of it, it's human nature. We can't help it. And just the way you offer alternatives as well. So, for example, if you say level 1 is a cat-cow, level 2 is downward facing dog, 3 is a balance.
Oh, there you go. Type A personality all over that.
I don't use those at all. I would say we're looking for an experience inside your body. Let's have a look for an experience where you're feeling some stretch down the back of your hamstrings. If you're not feeling the stretch in this position, maybe you want to try this position.
Yes. What do you find translates into your anaesthetic practice from that?
This whole trauma-informed approach has been transformational in the way I approach patients. It's not having any expectations of the person who's come into the room in front of me. I don't know what they're bringing. So I always introduce myself and then say, is it okay if I ask some questions? Again, it's invitational.
Oh, I like that.
And then I'll say, okay, the next thing I need to do is put a cannula in. Is that okay with you? Which side would you like me to choose? Do you have a preference? So again, they don't necessarily have a choice about me putting a cannula in, but they can choose. As a lot of people say, please don't put it in my hand. It really hurts.
Yes. And you don't know that if you don't ask the question, I suppose.
That's right. Or if you don't invite that sort of an option. And then there's a whole cultural overlay as well. where First Nations people will often come in with intergenerational trauma or personal trauma based on their previous experiences of healthcare and not being seen. So I'll always say, is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable? And it could be as simple as, can I bring you a warm blanket? Some patients will say, I don't like looking at the doors of the theatre because I feel like this sense of impending doom. So can I just spin the trolley around so you're looking the other way and we'll leave the doors open? Maybe we can adjust something to make this whole process feel more comfortable.
Yes. And I'm not a psychologist, but it enables a sense of autonomy in them, some ownership in the process.
For sure. That sense of gaining back a bit of control when they feel out of control.
That's a really lovely way of putting it. So what's the juggle like now? So how much yoga are you doing? How much anaesthesia are you doing? How's it all fitting? Is this the right balance for you at the moment?
It's constantly shifting. So after my dad died, I've actually stopped my yoga teaching. Just temporarily, I think. I just didn't feel resourced enough in myself to be able to give.
And good for you to give yourself that permission as well.
Yeah. And it was interesting because that teaching usually happens in an evening at the end of a day of anaesthesia. And I'll often get into the space and think, oh gosh, I'm not sure what I've got to give. But just being in that space energizes me. And I find that no matter how difficult it is to walk into the space, I always walk out feeling better. The teaching actually gives me as much as it gives the students. I now find that the yoga I'm really craving is more yin yoga, the really slow, long relaxation. So I'm trying to get to a yin yoga class a week. The yoga balance is way, way, way down compared to how it's been earlier on in life.
I love it's a bit like our anaesthetic careers, you know, how your yoga has at times gotten very busy and contracted and moved into one area and moved into another area. There's also some parallels there with how our anaesthetic careers can also change over the course of our lifetimes.
Sure. I think it's the same when you start out in your medical career. Everything is defined by what specialty you choose and what kind of doctor you think you're going to be. And over time you realise, well, hang on a minute, it's whatever serves me right now. And it's the same with the yoga. When I started out, I wouldn't do anything else but Ashtanga yoga. And now I'm just like, I just need to do something. My body will tell me what I need. If I don't practice for a couple of weeks, my body craves it. And I just have to listen to that. I've got mats all around the house. I've got a mat in my bedroom. I've got one here in the study. So wherever I am, I can just roll a mat out and get on the mat and do something.
Oh, I love the mental imagery of that. That's wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to say about yoga, anaesthesia?
Oh, I could talk about yoga all day, as you can probably tell. I think yoga is different to other forms of exercise. I think you get the benefits of yoga despite yourself rather than because of yourself, if you see what I mean. It benefits you in so many ways that you won't be realizing. It might not always feel good, but you always feel better.
Yeah. When I was studying for my first part exam, and I don't know how I found out about it or what made me think of doing it, but I went away for a meditation retreat and it was 3 days of not being able to talk the whole time. We alternated between sitting and walking meditation. And the whole time I'm just like, I don't get this. I don't understand this. This is so slow. What am I doing here? When can I leave? It was beautiful countryside. There were moments of this is nice, but there were many, many more moments of I don't get it. They look like they're meditating. I'm not meditating. But I remember the first morning I came back and I was just having breakfast, getting myself ready for work. And I realised after some period of time that as I sat there eating breakfast, all I had done was sit there and eat breakfast. I was totally in that moment of just eating breakfast. And I craved it, like you said, with the yoga. And I craved it when I studied. And my study improved phenomenally after that. When I sat down to study, I was just studying.
Yeah. I remember I went to a workshop by a woman called Dina Kingsburg, and her telling a story about going to a chanting workshop. And like chanting has never been anything that I've been particularly interested or into, but she was saying the way she sees it was like this chanting workshop is like I'm thinking and I'm chanting and I'm thinking and I'm thinking and I'm chanting and I'm chanting and I'm thinking and I'm chanting and I'm chanting and I'm thinking, and like gradually it shifts and then I'm chanting and I'm chanting and I'm chanting and the thinking has fallen away. It's the same with the yoga. It's like I'm thinking and I'm moving and I'm thinking and I'm breathing and I'm moving and I'm breathing and I'm moving and oh yes, there is a bit of thinking, but it's like it's falling away.
Yes. That's so true. And I think that was probably the peak of my meditation skills just after that and getting through the first part, because I've always struggled to get back into it. And then when I was trying to do more mindfulness and more meditation, I found that doing yoga first to get me into meditation was the key I needed. It's like my body needs to move. I can't just suddenly get up and plonk myself and demand stillness.
That goes back to the way the Ashtanga was set up, that you do the warm-up, the sun salutations, the standing, the seating, the upside down, and then the sitting. You can't do the sitting unless you've done all the rest of it first.
So maybe there's still part of my brain that's sort of Ashtanga wired or something.
Or just maybe it's not a particular form of yoga. Maybe the people who put these things together are actually quite smart and know that that's how bodies work. You can't expect your mind to be still unless your body's ready to be still.
Yes, I've learnt that with my body over time. So definitely they were onto something and I should have listened to them many years ago.
But, we come to these lessons when we're ready for them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, look, I find this all very interesting, and the connection between mind and body, but also the impact on us as people and on us as doctors, and then what we can also bring into our anaesthetic rooms. I always feel when you come out of a yoga class, you feel like you've done this inner spa treatment for your body and your mind. And I feel there's been a bit of that as well, just by having this conversation with you. It's just been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation and perhaps feel a little inspired to try yoga, or maybe you've got some renewed motivation towards your New Year's resolutions or health goals. I know I certainly felt inspired, and I hope you also appreciated Andrea's expertise, the way certain yoga terms and names just rolled off her tongue. As she said, she could talk about yoga all day long, and she is keen and willing to share her insights into yoga. So if you have any questions, no matter how big or small, then please feel free to send them to me via email and I can forward them on to her. The best email to reach me on is podcast@asa.org.au. I mentioned at the start that one of my big revelations was made through a coaching conversation. If that is something that you are curious about, then I suggest listening to episode 98 with Dr Anne Frankel. She's an anaesthetist who is now a certified coach. If you are a woman interested in coaching to become a better leader, or if you're a man interested in fostering the next generation of women leaders, then consider joining the Australian and New Zealand chapter of WELI. WELI stands for the Women's Empowerment Leadership Initiative. I chat with the US-based founders of WELI in episode 83. That's Professor Nina Deutsch and Associate Professor Larry Schwartz, about what WELI is and how it came about. Andrea talked about her pathway to registration as a specialist anaesthetist in Australia coming from the UK. That was a while ago and times have changed. To find out more about the latest processes, then listen to episode 106, where I chat with College President Professor David Story about the Medical Board of Australia's expedited pathway as well as the college pathway. And finally, I expressed interest in recording a podcast about trauma-informed care. That is in the production pipeline, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you. If you're interested in hearing that when it lands, then please hit that subscribe or follow button. At the end of a yoga class, we would often say namaste as a gesture of gratitude and respect and acknowledging the shared effort of the yoga practice. So, in that same regard, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And as always, I hope you and your patients are staying well out there.
This has been Australian Anaesthesia, produced by the Australian Society of Anaesthetists, with many thanks to host and editor Dr Susie New, with music by Soda Lime Music, sound and engineering by Bearview, and graphics by the ASA Communications team. For more content, please visit www.asa.org.au.